Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth-generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I've faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to talk about a conversation that I had within a network that I'm a part of. And so within this network, we kind of have, I'd say, basically weekly or every other week, we've kind of got a boardroom call with different members of the group where we kind of discuss different relevant topics within the industry, but then also just within topics that are going to lead us to be better in our businesses. And the one thing that we discussed this last week, which I thought was very valuable, was a topic around the 6 skill sets that will pay you for life. And so I really thought this call was very valuable, very relatable. And so I wanted to kind of take these topics and kind of put my own spin on them and kind of put my take on them. So I want to kind of dive into each of them one at a time. And so the first one that we're going to start with is this topic, or the skill set, I should say, of speaking. Now, what is speaking to you? What does speaking mean to you? For me, being able to communicate my thoughts effectively, the act of physically speaking, the words directly coming out of my mouth to the person that is receiving those words. Now, at first, I don't give much thought to speaking. I overlook it as something that should just come naturally, something that we should just be able to do. Speaking, me literally speaking into this mic, speaking to the person that I'm talking to. Don't always find it super valuable, or I'd say necessary, if that makes sense. I mean, we all know that we need to speak to somebody at some point or another. Unless you're a hermit that lives by himself or never sees anyone, you need to know how to speak. But in today's world, physically speaking happens less and less. I mean, honestly, with the technology that we have, why learn how to speak when you can text someone or just send a message to them? So here's kind of my thoughts around this is, like I mentioned, in a world that is highly connected, but also very disconnected, it's super important that we need to learn how to be able to speak effectively. And that'll really set you apart. That's going to really turn you into a very influential person. Now, whether that's as a father, a mother, wife, husband, businessman, leader, or even a community member, it's super important, and you would become a very influential person if you could just learn how to speak effectively. So that's what we're going to talk about. For me, when it comes to speaking, I want to kind of share my thoughts and experiences around this in my past. Now, I'm kind of naturally an introvert. Part of why I'm talking to a microphone and sending this out through a podcast is just because getting in front of people and speaking is not necessarily something that I enjoy. It's just not something that I'm good at, or at least in my opinion, I'm not good at. Quite frankly, if you want me to become an extrovert, it's going to take some liquid encouragement, if you know what I mean. And I'm sure that's kind of the case for most of us. And so kind of growing up, I never really was taught how to speak, or maybe I never took the time and thought to learn how to actually speak. And in most situations, in school, we always had different projects that we were working on where you had to get up and speak in front of the class and different things of that nature. And for me, whenever that happened, the feelings that always came up for me was, obviously I was nervous, to say the least. But, sweaty palms, you get really, I'd say, your hands are shaky, pit in the stomach sort of feeling like I was going to make a fool of myself or say something wrong or mess up. I mean, I feel like these are very common feelings for all of us. But for me, especially, I just was never one that wanted to get up and speak in front of people. I just feel like it was hard for me to physically communicate my message. Now, today, I see tremendous value in just knowing how to physically speak. But there's much more to it than literally blurting words out of your mouth. So as we dive into this, with the call that we had and this discussion around this topic, it was super valuable, and we really kind of dove into it just past, like I said, blurting words out of your mouth. We talked about how to speak, or rather how the way that you speak gets interpreted by the person receiving the message. Not only the words that you use, but the tone of your voice, your body language. And you're probably thinking, well, duh, all of this makes sense. Of course, these things are going to affect how you speak. But how often do we actually take these things into consideration when we're talking to our wife, our kids, our team members, or even like our parents? So, especially when it comes to parenting, this really kind of hit home for me because, like when I dealing with the boys, maybe they're really annoying the crap out of me or doing something bad or, being naughty. For me, it's how I clench my teeth when I talk, or I change the tone of my voice, or even when I talk and I'm kind of upset, I'll clench my fist. And so oftentimes I just don't think about those things. They're just kind of second nature and they just kind of happen. But it really has me thinking, am I really coming across to them how I want to? Is that really how I want to come across to the boys or whoever I'm talking to at the time? So let's just kind of switch this a little bit and take this to a bit of a different perspective. The other thing when it comes to talking with someone is we need to be considerate or aware of where that person could be mentally. Now, when I get into this, I'm not saying that we need to be super compassionate or like all touchy-feely sort of thing. And I think it's just more important that we, what does that person have going on in their life right now? We just need to be considerate of where they're at. Is that team member having personal struggles at home? Did your son or daughter have a rough day at school? Did your wife have a rough night at home with the kids by herself because you were out, combining or something? These are just things that we need to consider if we want to effectively communicate our message and have good quality conversations. So as we kind of go through, as we talk about these things, some of the lessons that I've learned or some things that I want you to maybe take away is think before you speak. Now, we hear this all the time, but truly, how much do we take this in consideration with our conversations? Do we truly think before we open our mouths and blurt some words out? And like I said, also think before you speak and how the tone of voice that you're going to use, your body language, what you're acting like as you're speaking. Think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. Now, the next one here is practice. This would probably apply more to maybe more important conversations or maybe mostly in business or one that you're maybe a little bit more nervous about having. This could even be a conversation with your parents. If you're just really trying to drive home an important conversation, I think it's truly important that we can have a practice conversation, really go through this in our heads, how things are going to play out. But just think, how much more prepared would you be if you could just run through the conversation a few more times prior to the actual conversation itself? And I can guarantee you'll at least be slightly more comfortable. It's the same thing for when I'm doing this podcast. I need to sit down and maybe run through it once or twice so that way I can kind of get these words in my head. That way I'm more familiar with what I'm trying to say. It's all relevant if we can just practice a few times before the actual conversation. We're going to be much more prepared. Now, the next one here would be learn. Learn from your past conversations or engagements. Learn what works, learn what doesn't work. And oftentimes this sounds very simple, but we don't always take the time to learn from our past and to learn what we could do better in the future and better conversations in the future. Last, but certainly not least, would be aware and have awareness. And I think this is the most important one. Just like you always want to be aware of your surroundings, you also need to be aware of who you're talking to and what that person might be going through, or multiple people if you're talking to a crowd or a conversation. Where are they at in their state of mind and their season of life? And most importantly, be aware of how they might be receiving your message. So really kind of keep these things into consideration and be aware. I think that's a big one. We need to really remember that one. So as we kind of wrap up here and kind of in closing, I think it's important just to get out there and go speak. Oftentimes make a phone call rather than a text message. In today's world, it's so easy to go send a text or an email versus actually calling somebody. I'm guilty of this as well. The one thing I want to just touch on here when it comes to actually getting out there and speaking, for me, I've actually got a hard time when it comes to actually speaking, say, words off of reading a book or reading words off of a paper. And even when I do these podcasts, I'm reading notes, but it's kind of saying hard to read the notes and communicate the message at the same time. So one thing that's actually helped me is I read a lot to the kids. We read a lot at night. That's a good habit that we've actually been able to get into, is reading stories at bedtime. And I actually found it very valuable to read through the stories and to literally read the words on the book, on the page, and try to communicate it in a way that you're not monotone, using a tone of voice, maybe a different characteristic voice with the book that you're reading to the kids. So that's been super helpful for me. Just a little side hint there, a little comment that I'll make. So the one thing I just want to say here is the more often you speak, the better you'll be at it. I mean, plain and simple. Sounds simple, but it really is a matter of just getting out there and going speaking. That's all I got for this time. We will catch you on the next one. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.